I'm back now, and my case is entirely assembled and glued up at this point. The next step is I went ahead and filled in all of the gaps with some wood putty. I found a color that matches the butternut as close as possible. I couldn't find anything that matched perfectly because butternut's not exactly your most common species to work with, but that should conceal any remaining small gaps in the joinery that I have. But really the next task now is to sand all of the joinery flush. I need to make sure that every single one of these sliding dovetails, as well as the dovetails on the tops and the sides, are also smoothed out. So the outside of the case is really no problem for me to handle with basically a block plane and my standard random orbit sander. The challenge I have is all of the small detail here, where I have this narrow shelf that I need to sand, and I want to make sure that I'm not gouging the adjacent surfaces. So I kind of gave this some thought and decided that I didn't really have the right tool on hand to do the job. So, as is often the case, if I don't have the right tool for the job, I'll go out and buy it. So I did a little bit of research, and I looked into using like a fine multi-master, which is, a really small pad sander, but I didn't think that was going to be right for, a piece of furniture like this, and it's also a lot of sanding that I have to do. So what I decided to go with was Festool. This is the Festool DTS 400 EQ. I would call this a detail sander. It is a random orbit sander, but it only has a 2mm stroke. And that's going to be really important because I really don't want the sanding pad to be digging into one of these cross pieces when I'm sanding this shelf. And as you can see, it also has kind of a fine detailed point on the top. So that'll let me get into any of those, nooks and crannies here. But I will be able to use almost the entire pad as well, because I can get this right up against the areas where the dovetails slide in. So I already have the Festool vac and everything. I've been told that you really need to turn the suction down quite a bit. Otherwise, this will actually grip too much and it'll start to gouge the wood, especially in something soft like butternut. So I've got the vacuum pressure turned all the way down on my vac. I'll give you a closer angle here, and you can see how I can use this sanding pad to really get into these nooks and crannies here. Now I've got all of my joinery cleaned up. I've sanded to 150 grit, which is really fine for the time being. It's, this thing's going to get moved around and probably dinged up a little bit, so I'm certainly not going to bring it to its final finish ready sanding state. But I wanted to at least have all the joints flushed up and the case kind of cleaned up before I move on. My next step now is to start fitting the drawer fronts. And what's going to make this project a little unique is that every single drawer is going to be a different size and a different dimension. What I'm going to do for these drawers, obviously you don't want the final drawer to be the exact same size as your opening, but what I've found over the course of time is that after I kind of plane and sand the drawer fronts, or the drawers once they're assembled, I do end up with about a 1/16 inch reveal all around. So I'm going to just measure these to the basically exact dimensions of the drawer opening, build the drawers to those specifications, and then plane down the sides and the tops so that I do get an undersized drawer. Well, a funny thing happened when I was sizing all of the drawer fronts. As you can see, I have all the drawer fronts nice and fitted into the case, with the exception of the second level drawer. And unfortunately, what happened is that I managed to cut the second drawer front right in half. You can even see the D2, I split the D2 right down the middle. Basically, I just wasn't paying enough attention. I knew there was a storm going on outside, so I was trying to get through fitting the drawer fronts before I lost power. And anytime you try to speed things up or rush the process, you're bound to, at the very least, mess something up, and at the very worst, you could hurt yourself if you're going through the process too quickly. So that left me with a real dilemma as to what to do to solve this problem. I don't have any more butternut. I pretty much used all of my stock, and there wasn't a single piece left big enough to make this drawer front out of. Obviously, there's no way to glue the end grain back together for a drawer front. So I was really left with two choices. One, I could go with a completely different species for the drawer fronts using something else I had on hand, and I did weigh a few options there. The other alternative was to go buy some more butternut, and my thinking was if I were to buy more butternut, I would probably have to redo all of the drawer fronts, not just the second drawer, because I would actually probably buy it at a different store, because I would have to go someplace a little bit closer than where I bought this stock. And you want to make sure that the grain pattern, the color, and everything sort of matches among all of the drawer fronts. So it really left me with a key decision to make in this project. In the end, I decided to sort of call a shop timeout and go buy some additional butternut and remill the drawers, because I didn't really want to sacrifice the overall look and design of my piece just because I made a mistake that I could relatively easily fix. So I went and bought enough butternut to redo all the drawers, and I have all those pieces laid out here. What I found, however, was that they really didn't look that much different than the pieces of butternut I used already for the existing drawer fronts. So I brought in my first drawer here, and in laying out all these pieces, I thought I could sort of look at which one sort of matched the first drawer best in terms of both color and grain pattern, because those are the two that you will sort of logically group together in your mind. And then I'll be able to redo just that one drawer front rather than having to rebuild all of them. By just holding up my D1 drawer, or my bottom drawer, and lining it up to each of the boards, I can kind of get the best, really color match is what I'm looking for the most here. For example, this piece here has just a little bit more almost pinkish color in it, and this has a lot less of that. And I'm finding that this longer piece up here has kind of the right color. It doesn't quite have as much of that pink. It's a little bit more brown like this D1 drawer. And I also like that it has some kind of cool grain pattern going in it, which the D1 drawer does as well. These pieces over here are almost more rifts on and don't really have any interesting grain. So I'm thinking at this point I'm probably going to try to source it from this board somewhere, and I'll just find a spot where I get the most interesting grain pattern that'll match this drawer, and then I can basically get back to where I was. Once I got my little drawer problem figured out, I was able to go ahead and do all the dimensioning for the sides and backs of the drawers. And I didn't bother recording any of that process because it's pretty straightforward in terms of just, milling the stock and cutting everything to width and to length. But the real challenge was in actually figuring out the right widths and the right lengths for everything. Because in this case, virtually all the drawers are different sizes, and they're not just different widths, they're different heights and they're different depths. So I really had to just kind of keep track of everything pretty carefully. So I've kind of collected them into these groups of drawer parts. So this is my bottom drawer. This is all 4 parts. This is my second drawer up, and then I've got the 2 drawers above that, and then the 3 drawers on the top. So I've kind of just grouped together these kits so that I can keep track of the drawers. Next will be actually laying out the drawers and deciding how I'm going to have the dovetails work. Because of the different heights of each of the drawers, I'll have to figure out sort of different patterns or spacing for each of the sets of dovetails. I'm starting to lay out the actual dovetails now. And once again, because all of the drawers are different sizes, I really need to lay out each layer of drawers or each level of drawers separately. So what I'm showing you here is one of the drawer sides from the second drawer up, which is one of the larger single drawers, and then the third drawer up, which is where we split into 2 drawers. And you can see that there's a significant difference in the height of the drawer sides. So I just kind of wanted to point this out because this is the first level where I go from having 3 tails and 4 pins on the drawer. I've already described the back dovetails here. Because the back is actually narrower to receive the bottom of the drawer, that's where I wanted to start, because I basically identified that by trying to stick with 3 tails, the tails were really starting to get small, especially on the back. So I'm just going to drop down to 2 tails for the third drawer up, and I'm going to try to keep the pins about the same width across all the drawers, and I'll just vary both the number and then the width of the tails as I progressively get smaller and smaller towards the top of the chest. I'm being somewhat deliberate in this project to not get too exact with how I'm laying out the tails, because I want this piece to look handmade. Because if I'm going to hand cut all the dovetails for 7 drawers and for the case, I want people to be, you know, I want it to be fairly obvious that this was a handmade piece. So my method for laying out the tails is actually fairly straightforward. I start out and mark my top pin. Again, this is the front, so my top and bottom pins are actually going to be pretty similar. And again, I'm just eyeballing this. I just want that pin to be slightly rectangular, and that's really my only goal here. I just don't want the pins to be square because I don't think that looks good. And then I'll just mark an X because this is the tailboard, so the pins are actually what I'm wasting out. And then in my highly scientific method, again, this is the third drawer up, and so this is where I've dropped down to just 2 tails. I just sort of eyeball where the center is there, put a little mark, and then I use that to set my center pin, basically guessing to about what half the width of that pin should look like, and then marking the other side and marking an X to waste that out. Now it was a little bit more involved when I was doing 3 tails on each board, because then I had to sort of split it 3 ways, which is a little bit harder to eyeball, but I would basically just kind of stick my thumbs there and then make a mark and go from there. So I'm not measuring these out. It's by no means a scientific process, and I think it'll actually just accentuate the fact that this is a hand-built piece. Well, it was a lot of work, but I finally got all of the tails finished for the drawers. Now the drawers aren't done yet. I still have to cut the grooves that will receive the bottoms. I also have to glue up the bottoms as well, but frankly the dovetails were really the hard part with all these drawers. I decided to actually go through and count how many dovetails this project has in total, including the drawers as well as all the joinery, and it's 104, and almost all of those were hand cut. The only exception to that was really the machine cut sliding dovetails in the dividers. So this was really a kind of a hand tool intensive part of the project. But I think I'm over the hump now, and I'll be able to move on with finishing the drawers, and then I can get on to sort of the final details of this project before I move on to the finish.